How's everybody doing out there? This is Brian, back with my second part of my vlog dealing in the history of the KKK and as it compares to other organizations in this country. The first part of this video that I had made earlier, a few days back, was more of a history lesson as to the origins of supremacist hate groups like the KKK, including the KKK. And this all stemmed from the backlash being directed at the people from Missouri and the Missouri University campus who had the audacity and the gall to speak up about their treatment, or lack of humane treatment, lack of treatment as a human being, and the racist slurs and things that were being directed at them, which ultimately resulted in the school's president resigning, which in itself is, I guess, is a particular form of a victory. But it's one of those things where you have to understand this is not like cutting off the head of the snake and the body dying. That man was just a representative of many who still exist within that society, and that was proven in the days after the resignation, where there were God knows how many death threats issued towards black people from hating non-black people. I'll just keep it general like that. A few arrests were made. I guess hopefully they'll be considered hate crimes and crimes of terror, of terrorism, because that's pretty much what it is. But anyway, in the first video I spoke about the history of groups that were formed in this country, and in this video I'd like to pull the timeline into more current contemporary times. And one of the complaints that I had seen from various people who I guess claim they aren't racist, because for the most part I read a lot of blogs that deal with the left wing. Not to say that I'm a left wing person, but I just don't give any publicity, or I don't donate any of my time to right wing stuff. Their views are their views. They make it plain as day. So there really is no reason for me to go and read their obtuseness, But in that sense, you can almost halfway respect it, because they don't try to beat you in the head and lie to you and lie to themselves about what they feel. What they feel is what they feel, and that's it. So I read a lot of more liberal based blogs and things of that nature. And the comments that I see on these blogs are just heinous. They really are. And a lot of the comments that I was reading on various blogs were from people coming up with this weird, crazy comparison of the KKK to the Black Lives Matter movement and the Black Panther Party in particular. Those two specific things. And they were speaking about, in their comparison, their logic dictates that Black Lives Matter and the Black Panthers were hate groups, and is a hate group currently. I guess the new Black Panther Party, we'll throw that in there as well. And again, the first video was more of a history lesson. This is more of a debunking of the comparison, first of all, and a shot at every person who feels anywhere close to that thought process, but yet at the same time will, to their very last breath, tell you that they're not racist. Now you want to tell me that you want to compare the Klan to the Black Lives Matter movement and say that the Black Lives Matter movement is just as much of a race hate group as the Klan? And even the Black Panthers, who for some reason get this designation as a hate group, you obviously don't either don't know your history, or you choose to create this paradigm that fits this broken logic, because that's the only way it fits, is to just create your own stuff. Like, you created your own facts. And I like to tell everybody who listens to me that I am not here to try to convert people. It's not my mission in life to enlighten non-black people to our plight. because I honestly don't care about your validation, and most black people don't. That's one thing that white people get twisted, and non-black people. We're not looking for your validation. You coming with this whole, oh, I finally get it, I understand your struggle, is not really the end game for black people. The end game is simply to have equality. So me throwing things at you, you know, that you can't really refute or rebuke or debunk, is really just more me taking away your ability to say, I had no knowledge of this. I was ignorant to the fact. I didn't know. I didn't understand. Because ultimately, the theory is that even when you are enlightened, even when you are shown, even when you are told, and even when you do understand, you will refuse to acknowledge and accept. And that is the core problem that exists in this society. It is a systemic problem. It is a neurotic. It's a neurosis issue, and most people don't think of it in those terms. They think of it as having free will of thought. So if you have a free will of thought, you are consciously choosing to think this way. So how does this not make you any more of a racist? But we'll get into that. Going back to the Klan comparing themselves to the Black Panther Party. First of all, when it comes to any movement that involves black people, what people always seem to forget is that any movement that has been established by black people has been established based upon the oppression issued to them in the first place. There would be no Black Panther Party movement. There would have never been a Black Lives Matter movement. There would have never been a civil rights movement. There would have never been movements on top of movements. There would have never been a Million Man March. There would have never been an affirmative action. There would have never been legislations incorporated within the laws and bylaws had it not been for the oppression that created the need for these things to exist in the first place. So that is one form of the racism itself, the lack of acknowledgement that the only reason that these things even exist is because of the racism and the systematic oppression that exists in the first place that forced these things to happen. Remember, black people weren't given civil rights due to the benevolence of people. It didn't happen through some, moment of epiphany with this society. You pretty much were forced into it from outside pressures because it was bad for the red, white, and blue, the stigma of what we're supposed to represent all over the world. That was one of the main reasons why certain things got enacted, first of all. Now, again, the Klan and groups like the Klan were formed because of the pretty much hate in people's blood to see black people, regardless of all of the oppression that we have dealt with, when it came to slavery, when it came to the unwritten law, when it came to Jim Crow, when it came to the systematic oppression through voting rights cancellations and voter restrictions and things of that nature. The way that the penal system basically took over for indentured servitude and slash slavery, regardless of all the systematic things that were set up to oppress us and suppress us and keep us down, we still rose above it. And they could not stand that. So being that things couldn't be legally done to oppress black people, they decided to just jump on their own version of vigilantism and terrorism, because that's what basically the Klan and all these groups, which ironically always seem to have like a Christian-based name and a Christian-based mantra, were established because of that very fact that black people were still figuring it out, regardless of everything set up to keep us from figuring it out. And there's always been this paranoia and this fear of black people getting to a certain level of ascension, which will basically wipe out their side. So again, the Klan, people like them, were created because of their hatred for black success. And for the most part, those things succeeded. You know, they succeeded in keeping black people afraid. They succeeded in suppressing blacks from voting. They succeeded in intimidating people from trying to ascend in certain arenas. But of course, just as everything tends to do, things erode. Power, you know, erodes. And we still grow. And yet we still rise. And now we get to this more contemporary era where you see a new age of activism happening. And again, as soon as black people start speaking up and speaking out and defending themselves and speaking up for themselves, you automatically see this reaction, this equal and opposite reaction to our action of basically just speaking up and saying that we deserve better, we deserve to be treated equally and fairly and not be oppressed. Now, there was a great line, a great quote that I had read and posted on my wall a few days back from a journalist. I can't remember the name. They wrote that the problem, you know, exists in this society where people are intolerant towards other people who are intolerant towards intolerance. So basically what that means is instead of getting angry at the issue, you're getting angry at the people who are intolerant to the issue. And that's what happens now. And you tell me, how is that not a form of racism? When you acknowledge racism exists, you acknowledge that black people are treated unequally to others in this country. You like to get on these blogs and you like to write and you like to talk about how, yes, I understand you are not being treated fairly. But if you would just, you know, if we could all just forget about this and just move forward, if you could just tone it down a little bit and stop being so, maybe if you weren't so bombastic about it, maybe if you weren't so combative about when you make your point, maybe if you weren't this and maybe if you weren't that. Basically doing everything in a somewhat friendly kind of manner, or at least cordial. You want to cordially make people be quiet. You just want to cordially encourage us to just shut up and stop talking about this and just move on. Now you tell me you understand the issue, but you're not attacking the issue. You're talking to me about if we all just stuck our heads in the sand, it'll just go away. That's basically your logic. So your logic, in effect, is a racist logic. Because you're not attacking racism, you're attacking the people who are showing you and delivering the message that racism exists and it needs to be eradicated. So instead of attacking the issue and attacking those who perpetuate the issue, you attack us, who are basically the victims of racism. But then you want to talk about how you're my brother. You want to talk about how I got love for you. You don't have love for me. If you had love for me, and if all lives mattered, then my life would matter, and my plight would matter. Which that takes me to another issue about this all lives matter stuff. I read a comment from a person that got at somebody who used that all lives matter thing in response to a Black Lives Matter topic, basically putting him on blast by saying, for hundreds of years, you guys, the non-black people of society, have pretty much dominated the tenor and scope of society, and never during any of this time did all lives matter to you. It didn't exist it didn't exist hundreds of years ago. It didn't exist 20 years ago. It didn't exist 10 years ago. But it started existing as soon as black people started saying Black Lives Matter. And again, that goes back to the whole hypocrisy. Because you'll sit there and you'll say, well, all lives matter. All lives matter. Not just yours. When did it never matter? When did your life never matter? When did non-black lives not matter? But again, you will sit there and you will acknowledge that black lives are not treated on an equal playing field as white lives. You will acknowledge that. You will say you are being mistreated, you are being oppressed. but your life doesn't matter any more than mine. You point out that my life is actually seen as lesser than, but it still can't be, it can't be, any more equal than yours though. So you're basically deflecting away from the actual point. You want to acknowledge that, yeah, I know y'all have it hard out here, man, but come on, let's not start acting like, really? And you're my brother. You're my brethren. I'm supposed to feel that. You're supposed to tell me that you don't have racist tendencies. But as soon as I start speaking up for myself and defending myself and saying, this is what we go through, we show you video, things that can't really be refuted. We give you lessons upon lessons upon lessons and stories upon stories upon stories. But that's not good enough for you. You don't want to validate. You don't want to accept. And therein lies the problem. That's why things don't change. Because you don't want things to really change. Because in order for things to change, you have to change. And in order for things to change, that means the scope changes. You don't have the ability to have this blissfully, comfortable existence anymore. And you can't, subconsciously, you can't accept that. Consciously, you say you accept that. Consciously, you say, well, if things just change, I would be the first one cheering and applauding and all that. But you don't want to change. You want to continue to be who you are. You don't want to change. You don't want to invoke or affect change. And when you see people trying to affect change, you try to dissuade them from doing it. You try to sabotage the thought process of others who are trying to affect change. Now, if you're trying to sabotage people who are trying to affect a change that you claim that you want to happen and you're supporting, how is that not hypocritical? How are you not being a racist? How are you not trying to maintain the status quo? The same status quo that you claim you agree with is unfair. Think a little hard. Think a little harder. And think a little bit more, critically, self-critically. Look at yourself and think. Are you really about all lives mattering? Are you really about what you say you are about? Yeah. Because I haven't seen it. And I'm not validating what I haven't seen either. So if you're not going to validate, neither are we. And I guess we'll just keep playing this charade. Hopefully we won't. Hopefully you'll just get it. But so many of us have been, waiting. And we're still waiting. So, but as we're waiting, I'll still be talking. And people like me will still be talking. So there it is. And there's my spiel. And may we all be blessed. And may we all somehow get it eventually. Take care. Later.